IVM.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.
Here's your smart fact of the day. What exactly is a town square? A town square is a square, plaza, public square, city square, urban square, or piazza. It's an open public space commonly found in the heart of a traditional town, but not necessarily a geometric square. It's used for community gatherings. Sometimes they're called civic centers, market squares, and where I am in the UK, it's called the village green in a quaint fashion. Welcome to Smarter with Sid, and today we are going to talk about Elon Musk and his impact on the world's largest town square. Only it's digital and its name is Twitter. Let's go. By now, people must be wondering, why is this man continuously talking of Twitter? Didn't he do an episode on Twitter and Elon Musk's share in Twitter just a few days ago? Well, I'm not a Twitter spokesman, nor am I obsessed with Twitter, but I am seeing reality unfold amongst us in a strange way. Elon Musk's accepted proposal to purchase Twitter for $44 billion has investors and users really wary about the future of the company. Shareholders are worried because, Musk's financing follows Tesla's share price drop. And users are worried that how is the richest man in the world going to change the social media platform so loved by so many people? And just recently, Tesla's stock dropped by 12.2%, wiping out $126 billion in market value over fears that Musk would be leveraging his holdings in the company to pay for Twitter. Wow. Now, this is all going to change, of course, because Twitter will be taken private and the future for Twitter is going to be particularly weird. Now, let's keep in mind that Musk is not financing this himself. He's taking Morgan Stanley's help in financing this. So clearly, there are some people who are colluding with Musk to make sure that this happens. But let's not get into the nitty-gritties of the politics over here and try to understand first principles, which is what Smarter with Sid tries to do. And we spoke about town square to start with, and I wanted to have a chat about town square. A town square is supposed to be a place wherein people come in, have a community gathering, chill out a little. Maybe people who want to vent their grievances and frustrations do so. In fact, when Twitter started, I had actually jokingly called it the digital speakers corner. Speakers corner is an interesting place in Hyde Park where people who have an opinion, who are practicing for becoming speakers, or genuinely disgruntled folk just stand up on a soapbox and start yelling at the crowd and making their point of view known. The crowd barracks them and stuff like that, and it was a very amusing sight to see. Now we are seeing the digital equivalent of it on Twitter for the past so many years. But a town square has always been on the basis of a modicum of free speech. Now, when we talk of free speech, people have various opinions about free speech. Some feel that free speech should be absolutely free, which means people should be able to speak whatever the hell they want to. Some feel that it should be free till the people are being harmed or being either emotionally abused or verbally abused or physically there is a threat to them. Then there are some people who say that no, we want this place to be clean and we don't allow any sort of banter or sledging or any kind of bad words or anything of that sort. So free speech itself is a very gray concept. What we need to know, however, is what is Elon Musk's understanding of free speech. And he said that in a very clear way, in a very simple way, actually. What he said was, he believes free speech should be determined by the laws of the land, which means that free speech should not be determined by anything else except for laws that govern. Now, this is very easy to say and very noble as a sentiment, saying, look, whatever the laws of the land are, that is the free speech. But Twitter is a global platform, which essentially means that laws of the land also vary. All right, Mr. Musk might be focusing on the US as the primary place wherein he's, looking at Twitter. But even though it's a US-centric approach and maybe it's an idealist sort of way of looking at things, I'm wondering how many people actually feel that Elon Musk's understanding of free speech will be followed by people who are actually on Twitter. People will perhaps always be trying to push the line when they're in the town square, isn't it? This brings me to my second point. What is the inherent wrong thing with rich people buying media companies? Ask Jeff Bezos, he's got the Washington Post. Ask Rupert Murdoch. Ask so many other people down the length and breadth of history, and you'll find out that business houses, rich people always want to have media houses under their wing because that's the way in which they're controlling the narrative. And of course, that's the way in which they're pleasing advertisers as well as their tribe, their subscribers. You might argue that it's the right thing or the wrong thing, but when you're looking at Mr. Musk buying Twitter and making it private, it means he's the king. He's the guy who's going to decide. His rule is going to be law. His understanding is going to be the right one. Right now, we are blessed with the fact that he perhaps has a centrist understanding, which might mean that it's neither towards the left or the right, but it's quite likely that, he might change his perspective on Twitter and on free speech in the future. We'll always have to live with that fear. There was a very good article by Professor Scott Galloway in his newsletter, which talked about the fact that we need umpires and not kings. And while that was a different sort of article talking about a different sort of point, umpires but not kings seems to be what comes to my mind when I look at Twitter. Do we need a king who will rule fairly and justly in today's day and age, or do we need people who are great umpires who allow for things to happen? This is fraught with risk. Both are fraught with risk. It is not a simple, it's a wicked problem because even umpires can have their bias without knowing it. So many behavioral economics books have actually stated the fact that umpires are not as unbiased as they seem. And of course, kings are have their own bias. We are very worried about the king because it's just one person, isn't it? And that's where it is. Now, if I look at how Twitter started, I'm going back to the town square thing. It did a few fundamental things to change up the game. The first thing it did was that it made PR very different. Earlier, the PR spokesperson was the one who was the liaison between companies and brands on one side and journalists and the media on the other. Suddenly, Twitter allowed people like celebrities and other techno kings and blockheads and CEOs to talk directly with their adoring public and gain large followings of their own, almost making PR redundant, especially with President Trump. Now, it's okay and it has its advantages, but journalists were also looking at another advantage, wherein they were able to print the so called truth and give facts and opinions without actually going through editorial concerns and voices. You have a place which is a town square in Twitter about 10 years ago, which was focused around news. Now, this news was local, this news was international, this news was global, this news was national, and it had lesser of a tribal element to it. It brings me to an understanding that the people who had started the internet's first vision stood for this kind of an understanding wherein people are connecting to all over the world. They're looking at different people, connecting to like-minded people, interests, etc. But that remained an imagination, a vision, and an idealistic goal. What has actually happened is a mega platform. In fact, we just have two or three big platforms in the world. Twitter is actually one of the smaller ones, but certainly the most vocal one. And you have these platforms ruling the way in which our perceptions are being shaped for the reality that surrounds us. And this certainly is a far cry from the earlier vision that the internet's first pioneers had about the internet in general and social media after it came into being. Now let's go back to Mr. Musk. I think if you look at Elon's interviews and the way in which he's looked at trying to solve humanity's problems, and I'm giving him the biggest benefit of the doubt here, he wants to change humanity by making it a species that goes to different planets. He wants to look at solving the transportation problem. He wants to talk about solving, the way in which we pollute the earth and stuff like that. So he has got these ambitious goals that he's totally committed to. Twitter is a perfect platform for him to try and actually build on that vision for humanity that he's got. Now, whether that vision is good or bad, who the hell knows? He's got Neuralink, which might change the way in which your brain functions and alters your neural networks completely. That vision is completely belonging to him. And we better be very, very wary of that vision. Elon has a plan. Okay. Elon has a plan. The man has a plan. It's not good to discount him as an complete wild maverick. It is perhaps better to understand that he might be seeing something, a vision that excites him, which we are not literally connecting to at the moment. I think more to come on Twitter, but I hope you liked this specific episode of mine, which talks of the very latest happenings on Twitter. I swear I'll not talk about Twitter for a while, but who knows? Mr. Musk keeps going and doing crazy things, isn't it? If you like this episode, you'll like this podcast, do like and subscribe. If you like stuff like this, well, IVM's got even more fantastic stuff for you. And hey, if you like me, I'm the traveling professor, and you can always connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me on Instagram. Until next time.
Hello. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On The Habit Coach, author Aparna Piramal Raje shares with Ashton 7 mental health therapies. The Simplified Gang discussed the Tata Group's recently released Super App. On A Sip of Finance, Priyanka explains how inflation affects our households. On Tedhe Mede Raste's 100th episode, Keshav takes us to Amritsar's beautiful Golden Temple. Keshav, congrats for the 100 episodes. Wow, that's a whole 100 episodes. Check them all out. And on Smarter with Sid, Siddharth sheds light on why Netflix lost over 200,000 subscribers in the first quarter of 2022. Do follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, do tell a friend. It really helps us out a lot. Also, don't forget to rate us on any platforms you're listening on, and you can also check us out on YouTube. We are also doing a small listener survey to better understand how you respond to our shows and advertising on the network. We would really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it. It helps us build better shows for you. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week, SBI Life Insurance, India Water Portal, and Jupiter, a digital banking app.
Have you ever wondered where the business world is headed? How the ways in which we create, market, and sell to consumers will evolve? Or if we'll ever go back to wearing pants while working? For answers to all of this and more, tune into Advertising is Dead with me, Varun Dugirala. Every Tuesday, as I talk to entrepreneurs, leaders, and change makers from across business, media, marketing, and beyond. You can catch all episodes of Advertising is Dead on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcasts from.